Actual type development or personality development is going to take place within an environment. It has a context, a situation around it, and everybody and their path of development is influenced by a variety of factors. The most common and important environmental influences include the cultural, family, even individual preferences. For instance, what accidents may have come upon them, education, and we also want to look at how or what happens to a personality type development when their type is not supported. So the influence of cultural values and gender, this is part of our mainstream culture. Within the United States, this is more developed toward the extroverted behaviors and skills. Even parents and teachers with a preference of introversion worry that their child may prefer to play alone or engage in privacy or read by themselves. And even though many Americans prefer an introversion, report that as children they heard criticisms about their preferred attitude. And a common pattern in type development for introverts in the United States comes from the cultural value of extroversion. They often find that they have to direct more energy and attention toward their extroverted auxiliary function than their introverted dominant function. And as a result, their extroverted auxiliary function tends to become more developed than their dominant function. Expectations are also associated with gender roles, and they have a major effect on their development. Social values about gender-appropriate behavior can be particularly difficult for girls who have a natural preference for thinking, or for boys who have a natural preference for feeling. And though type development through non-US cultures is limited, it appears that most cultures have a predominance of sensing and judging types, and that institutions such as schools or churches or even governments in most cultures are going to support those sensing and valuing judges, the values and the behaviors. This means that most of these children with preferences for intuition and perceiving are going to really receive a lot of pressure to suppress what they already think and what is their dominant preference. Looking at the influence of the family, there are a lot of cultural values and social expectations that are taught through the family. And along with other influences, parents and siblings type preferences, values, and roles really do influence a child's ability to express their natural type preferences. Throughout the United States, most support extroversion. And extroverted children grow up in an introverted family. They find themselves isolated, disapproved of, and even discouraged from developing that extroverted function. In fact, any preferences that are opposite to the prevailing family norm is going to get critical attention from parents and from siblings. Of course, there are individual circumstances which impact type development, and this is influenced by the life choices and even accidents. Sudden changes in family or financial responsibilities are among the most that really alter the type development for an individual. Marriage is also another one, especially if the spouse has a complete opposite preference. It is going to really affect the individual course development of a person, at least for a little bit of a time. Working in a job maybe that is really focuses on a non-preferred function is going to delay the development of the dominant and auxiliary functions for an individual. Education has an impact on the developmental path of young people, as most people are going to really already assume. Few educational systems are really organized to support the different type preferences. Instead, we see that there is a traditional way of teaching which supports traditional values and traditional preferences. For instance, within the primary years or elementary school, there is more support on a combination of sensing and judging preferences. And those with a preference for intuition often report that they're criticized for being a little too messy or daydreaming or maybe not following the rules. In most Western cultures, schools teach and expect logical decision making, and even bright students with a preference for feeling they are taught to not trust their illogical feeling judgment and instead to develop the use of thinking. Traditional schools are very difficult for those who have extroverted sensing, and they really don't like those long verbal explanations, theoretical analysis, and the memorization of facts. These all really hinder the growth of a sensing individual or a sensing type. Colleges and graduate schools, however, they demonstrate and really push a bias for intuition. Can you see the disconnect then between high school and college? In high school and primary school, we're looking and really supporting the sensing and the judging. And then the student goes to college, and all of a sudden, those are not supported as much as what? Intuition. So people who work with children and psychological type really say that the ideal school environment is one that's really going to allow students to develop their dominant function and encourage them and provide opportunities for them to try out other behaviors. So what happens when the preferences are not supported or when they're not treated equally? Children simply have to learn to do what is necessary to survive, and they will adapt. However, in a normal, non-abusive environment, when they don't get the support they need for their preference, sometimes that doesn't really create a huge problem. However, it could have some impact. So on a very basic level, we're going to see a lot of stress, a lot of tension, and there's going to be a discrepancy and confusion and self-doubt for a child. In a minority type, however, between the family, school, work, culture, or anything, they typically are going to feel unheard, invisible, misunderstood, isolated, and underappreciated. And the result in difficulty is simply that they don't trust themselves. They don't trust their own type. They don't trust the natural process. And dominant intuitive types who do not develop the trust in their intuition are going to really struggle because they're not going to reach their potential until later in life. They're going to have some resentment and bitterness, anger. All of these things happen because their preference was not developed sufficiently. So developing trust, confidence, and flexibility in the use of a very preferred mental function requires not only the opportunity to use it and to feel comfortable with it, but also appropriate feedback needs to be received from others when that function is used.